Hello, everyone. Hello, Dale.
Hello, Danny. How are you today? Good to see you. Thank you, everybody. We're excited to be here. Very much appreciate being here. Generally speaking, Danny and I start this presentation off with a review of what SipSource is. Just as a reminder, SipSource is the aggregation of depletion data from about 20 wholesalers, exactly 20 wholesalers, and it provides the best view as to what's happening in the three-tier industry out there. To learn more, come visit us. We have a booth on the exhibition floor, and we're going to be running some sessions and do some learning about it with some participants in SipSource. So please do come visit us in the exhibition hall. With that, I'm very excited to be here. My Colorado state flag, this is coming home for me. I'm born and raised in Colorado. I was born and raised about 65 miles to the south of here in Colorado Springs. And I started in the industry working as a clerk in a liquor store about 65 miles north in Fort Collins, Colorado, while I was going to college. And that's how I got my start in this industry. And I'm reminded of what a great industry it is that we are in. And I know me, for one, feel so fortunate to have been able to build a career in this industry. And just look forward to the date, spending some time with you and talking to you about what's going on in the category.
So I started my journey in Canada. I lived in Toronto. That's a flag for the Ontario province. I worked back then for Nielsen on a whole bunch of consumer packaged goods categories like cereals and toothpaste and diapers and canned vegetables, you name it. Then I moved to Southern California after I married a California native, and I led Nielsen's beverage alcohol practice for over 20 years, and I can tell you that analyzing alcohol trends is a whole lot more exciting than working on baked beans. Since mid-2020, I've been working independently. I help mid to small size companies largely effectively use data to grow their business, and that includes SipSource data. So first of all, let me congratulate everyone in this room. And I say that because we are in a great industry. It's fun, it's social, it's exciting, and in the long term, we really have been blessed with and enjoyed growth. At the same time, I think we all know that 2024 was a challenging year, and we know that 2023 was no romp in the park either. But we do need to face facts, and we definitely have challenges in front of us. I think the previous speakers talked about some of those challenges between Francis and Dina. So it's now really going to take all of our energy, all of our creativity, all of our brains, and resolve to turn the ship around in a positive direction. So let me show you a little bit of those macro trends. And again, this is from SipSource, obviously. Here we're looking at wines and spirits together. Revenue is in green and volume is in blue. This is 12-month rolling volume percent change numbers. And you can see a couple things. One is that the trend is moving down. That's not the direction we want. Secondly, the gap between the two is shrinking. So the volume and value gap is shrinking as some of the luster premiumization that we've enjoyed for years and years is fading a little bit, and we'll look at that a little bit more. We do see, however, a slight improvement over the last 3 months into December of 2024. We'll hope that that continues. And if we take even a kind of a longer term view and we throw in beer, which is the gold line, so if you go way to the left, we're talking about what we saw back in 2020. If you look more currently, we're looking at 12 months over on the right-hand side to December of 2024. So no beverage alcohol category is immune from the challenges. That's really something that we had not seen in the past. Usually wine and or spirits, depending on the year we looked at, was growing. That's not the case now. And this is often on premise together. I think one of the things that we saw in 2020 and 2021, particularly for spirits, was in part a COVID-related spike in growth, far exceeding anything that certainly I had seen before. Maybe we got a bit spoiled. Maybe our expectations were raised a little bit beyond what was reasonable, but you can see that's kind of come down to earth since then. Trends have now stabilized, but I don't think any of us are happy with seeing trends stabilizing in negative territory without any real upward movement. And then the last look that we'll show on these numbers, wine is in red, core spirits, that excludes RTDs, is in blue. We've looked at a number of different data points. We've looked at shipments, we've looked at retail sales, Nielsen retail sales, both the off-premise as well as CGA and the on-premise. We've looked at depletions from SipSource, We've looked at points of distribution, which is some measure of number of items and the number of stores that our products are in. And then we've looked at DTC shipments, especially for wine, in particular to say whatever losses we're seeing in the three-tier business, it's certainly not being made up on the DTC side. So that's where we are now. You look at all those numbers, Dale. Where are you emotionally after all that?
Thank you for asking, Danny, and I'm so happy you're worried about my emotions. Just this came to mind, right? The 5 stages of grief, and I've been through all of these in the last 2 years, been angry about the trends, done the bargaining, denial. We've been through all of this and gone through it. And I will tell you that right now, I've moved to acceptance, and that the category really is, our numbers are what they are. We are where we are. And acceptance doesn't mean defeat. Acceptance means it's time to move on and figure out where we're going to go. And what are we going to do, and how are we going to fix this, and how are we going to get back on track? And I will tell you that as Danny and I have been doing this, a lot more enjoyable bringing good news to people than it is challenging news. And that made me think about this, right? That victory has many, many fathers, but orphan is a defeat. And you see the look from people. It used to be when we'd come down the hall, hey, how are you? You're great. Right now it's kind of like, oh, don't look at that guy. He's nothing but bad news. And so we're moving with this, but Danny and I take a lot of feedback, and we need feedback. And here's an example of feedback. I'm not going to read it. You can read it. An actual text I received after we released one of our monthly results as to what was happening in the marketplace.
So I think, Dale, what I would say is that not everybody's on the acceptance level there quite. A little bit of anger still. And I'll tell you, between you and me, I will continue to speak to you. So if no one else wants to talk to you, you still can count me as a friend. Let's go on to the next slide. What are some of the headwinds?
Well, I think it is important. The first question we have to answer is why. Why are things the way that they are? And why are we here? And really what we've said all along is it's not just one thing. And you heard Francis bring these up and talk about a lot of these. Number one, the consumer is changing. And there is consumer change. And we all need to keep up with that. Some of that generational change impacts some categories more than others. Some benefit from that consumer change that is happening out there. A lot of it is lifestyle. We just heard Laura and Dina talk about moderation and what's happening and all the pressures that are going on within that. There's a lot of competitive threats. Those are within the beverage alcohol category. They're outside the beverage alcohol category, and things that consumers are choosing. I have never in my life seen so many different products, and ease of getting product to market has been so easy. And there is such a plethora of items out there. It's crazy how fast new products are coming in. But then the economy, and it's always going to come back down to the economy. Inflation is real, and I agree with exactly what Francis said. Yes, inflation is moderating, but that's moderating off a lot of steep increases, and Danny's going to give some examples on that. Interest rates are higher, so operating capital's in a different place than it was 3 years ago. And when we think about those interest rates, some would say that interest rates have gotten high. Others are going to tell you that interest rates have moderated kind of back to normal ranges right now. And then we have consumer debt, and you put yourself and you do some self-reflection. I read the headlines that holiday spending was really good this year, that we saw these things, the holiday spending, October, November, December. Sadly, the first thing that came into my mind was, well, that means consumer debt's gone up. Credit card debt has probably increased. And that's going to continue to be a threat. And then there's the anti-alcohol messaging. We're all aware of that, and that's something that we all need to be aware of and address. And Danny, if you would expand on those topics.
Yeah, so I mean, the best way for me to expand on some of these topics is just to show you some pictures of some of the things that Dale was talking about. Just a lot of headwinds. It's really hard to say, is any one of those, what's it really doing? I just sort of sum it up that, there's a lot of them, and none of them really help. They're headwinds for wines and or spirits, whether that be cannabis, and that includes the THC seltzers, which, lots of good things, but in terms of, if there's any substitution, that's probably a headwind for wines or spirits. There's potential of GLP-1 drugs. I walked into my local Target store. I'm in Southern California, in South Orange County, and I can't buy any spirits there unless I get somebody to fish it out for me behind locked doors. That doesn't really make the shopping any easier, obviously, and just inhibits somebody purchasing some of these products behind those locked doors. Social moderation, obviously some consumers, especially led by younger generations, are drinking less. That new generation of legal drinking age consumers, if you think about the newest being Gen Z, we're talking about 70 million consumers roughly, of which only about half of them are now 21. There's about a little over 4 million new 21-year-olds coming on the scene. The potential for purchasing alcohol, obviously. Over 50% of them are multicultural. So the notion of young people and multicultural kind of being two different things, that's really a misnomer. They are one and the same. And their behaviors and preferences are different, again, from generations before them, and we really need to understand that. Dale mentioned the anti-alcohol tax. We just heard Dina and Dr. Laura. It certainly feels to me that that's well-funded, well-coordinated, coming after us. And if you kind of sum it all up, Colangelo and partners sort of updates a tracker every week, and they send it to me, and I look back at 2024 and all of the articles sort of in lifestyle and trade publications, pro-alcohol versus con-alcohol, and you can see in the public realm, I mean, it's ferocious, the attacks on us. So the more we obviously fight back with science over bias and all of those things and change the narrative, that's something we need to do. Inflation, I think, Dale, you mentioned inflation's come down. Francis mentioned it. Just to put a number on that, if you look at, and these are numbers in black from December of 2022 versus where it is today, December 2024, it has come down. But if you're talking to the average consumer, they're spending, when they go to a grocery store and purchase a basket of goods, it's 33% more than what it was back before, back 2020, 2019, versus 2019. So, we're largely kind of not feeling that things are getting cheaper because they're not over that long run. It's just inflation is easing. Away from home in particular, you can see the numbers in red are running those numbers are running pretty rampant, much higher than inflation at the home. And that's just making it more and more difficult for consumers to go out to restaurants and bars and order food and drinks and so on when it's really expensive to do that. And here's some of those the on-premise numbers. If you look at the bottom left-hand side, we can see in 2023 what it was for wines and spirits and now what it is for 2024, and these are just on-premise numbers. And you can see how the numbers have really swung even more, swung either more negatively or gone from positive to negative. I think there's some maybe some residual post-COVID stay-at-home behavior. I mentioned about inflation that squeezes out going out to eat. We know about pricing. It can be expensive with the markups in on-premise. And especially for the wine category where fine dining is so important, there's about a third less fine dining locations in the country now versus 2017. So the nature of restaurants is changing itself. So looking at all that, it feels like there's a bit of a struggle for on-premise operators, isn't it, Dale?
The on-premise is difficult. We're going to go back to 2020, and what this chart represents is the number of active accounts. We get this number from our friends at VIP, and VIP gathers data from beer, wine, and spirits. So it's a really good view as to what's really happening with active accounts. And to be an active account, all you have to do is in a short time period receive one depletion, one shipment to your outlet to qualify as an active account. And we know what happened in 2020 and how the on-premise got hit. We can see here now, finally at the end of 2024, that there is actually more active accounts now than there were in January of 2020. However, all of that increase is in retail accounts. And we see that the on-premise is still 1,500 outlets short of where it was, that they still have not caught up to that pre-pandemic level on the number of active accounts. The on-premise business, as Danny just outlined, is feeling more pressures on the economic side. I think about labor costs, those things. It's a really difficult world for them. And then also that is going to translate then into the supplier universe. And when we think about the supplier universe, for the first time ever, and this comes from our friends at the Wine Business Analytics Group, who tracks the number of wineries in the country. And for the first time that I can ever remember, there were fewer wineries last year than there were the year before. That you can see that line, and we saw it really start to drop off. We talked about this last year that would likely happen, but there's 1.5 fewer percent wineries open this year than they were. A lot of those are virtual. A lot of those are people who really don't own any brick and mortars, that they came in, they started a brand and moved on, but they are now out of business. And then if you think about it for California, Oregon, and Washington, where the bulk of them are, they're down 4.3% in the number of wineries. So we really do believe that there's going to be a right sizing of things that are going to happen. It's probably going to hit this area, certainly within the wine industry. We're going to see that happen. And then Danny, why don't you talk a little bit about the other industries?
Yeah, this sort of just supports what Dale was showing, but if you move over to the beer category, these are the number of craft brewers. Again, that was a segment that continued to grow and grow and grow, and when demand softens a little bit, the industry shrinks, you're going to see some natural reaction to that, which is more closings than openings, and that's what we saw again in 2024 for craft brewers. And on the spirit side for craft distilleries, I've got a number only up to 2023, but that's a segment that had been in the hundreds if you go back in time many years, and now it's well into the thousands, but that also is starting to flatten out. So we looked at sort of the supplier side. What's the picture, Dale, at retail?
Yeah, and so we just talked about the opening of accounts. This is a measure in SipSource that is accounts sold. So that is how many accounts are receiving a shipment. And what we can see here is that accounts sold were up last year 0.7, so almost 1% increase in the number of accounts sold. And you can see that it's pretty well spread out across the various sub-channels that are within that. The exception being the drug channel. And we're going to see more of that, right? The major drug players are going to be reducing the number of outlets. That's likely going to continue. And then there is a driver of it. And instead of looking at it by sub-channel, if we look at it by category, by product category, what we see here is that a lot of it is being driven by pre-mixed cocktails and wine cocktails. So a lot of that is being driven there. However, it's not exclusive to that, and that we really do see that we're getting new accounts, even there more so on the spirit side, that are happening out there. So the accounts sold are going up a little bit, mostly driven by cocktails. But Danny, what's happening with shelf space, and what does that look like?
Yeah, one of the ways we measure that is in the SipSource data, where we can look at points of distribution. So again, the number of items times the number of locations that those items are going into, sort of a combination of those two things. And you can look at the numbers on this slide, the blue dots, they're all, except for club stores, they're all down. So retailers, they're certainly thinking about their shelf space. How do they allocate their shelf space? Even if they don't shrink the shelf space in total, they're going to look at what deserves to be on the shelf, what maybe doesn't deserve to be on the shelf, and make some allocation changes. So, we're seeing a lot of just reaction to what we're seeing in the marketplace overall. So I think when you put we put a lot of facts in front of you. We'll come back to a little bit wine versus spirits specifically. But after all that, what do we do? We got a lot of data up here. What do we do with it all, Dale?
Yeah, and so the first question we asked ourselves is, why is it happening? Now it's about what are we going to do? And how are we going to move forward, and how are we going to get to solution? So the first thing should be no shock that two people who have made a living off of analyzing data get informed, drive the discussion with facts. Let's get fact-based and make sure you're leading with facts and good information. Number two, very big believer in planning. Plans need to stay aggressive. We need to continue to be aggressive, but you've got to be realistic on what's going to happen and moderating what that growth might look like, and build that plan with your wholesaler and your partners to get there. The next one, focus is going to be absolutely essential. As I look at the screen there, perhaps less is more. I think perhaps is wrong. Less is going to be more. We're going to have to shrink some things and really focus on the precious few things that really drive results, and that's going to get us where we go. And then the last one we have on here is look for opportunities to participate and to collaborate. And when I think about participation, we heard Dina talk about go write your senator, go do that. Well, go do that. Participate in that. We have a lot of things that are going to be happening with us as an industry where we really do need to get all of us moving and rowing that boat in the same direction if we're going to make this, turn this around. And then collaborate. And really what the word of the day I would say you're probably are going to hear here is collaboration, and moving to collaboration and getting that and building on those success stories that are out there. Because there are success stories that do exist. People are doing well within the category, and Danny's going to tell us about that.
Yeah, there's always, you drill down further into data, there's always success stories, right? There's, whether it be product segments, product classes, price tiers, any of those things, there are things that are doing well. I just looked at some scan data for the off-premise, and I looked at the top 500 wine brands in terms of, these are big wine brands. 35% of them are growing, right? That's, 30. That's a large number. 33 out of 100, 35% out of the 500. If I go over to the spirits category, it's 38%. If you have any of those brands, you have the facts, you're in much better shape to keep your position itself, grow your distribution, et cetera. So I want to get rid of the notion that like everyone's doing poorly. That's not the case, simply and unequivocally not the case. But we are in our place that on our journey, I think, as categories that a lot of other categories go through. They're introduced, they grow to maturity, whether it's spirits or whether it's wine, and we're kind of, depending on the product segment, but overall we're at that probably a mature stage. We don't want to be in that gray, downslope. We want to rather rejuvenate and restore healthy growth and get back on the yellow line and move us back into positive territory. So if we haven't said it 50 times, Dale, we're going to say again, it's not a question, look at the people at your table or across the room from you. They may be your competitors, but there's lots of room for collaboration at the same time, whether that's across tiers, across categories, across companies, across other industries, et cetera. But our first step, we're going to carry on a little bit more with being informed. So I'm going to take a look at the spirits category, just kind of some high-level things, and then we'll do the same for wine. So on the spirit side, here we looked at the product classes arranged from left to right in terms of their share by volume. So that's the blue bar, and that's the share of the spirits category. And then the blue dot is the percent change versus a year ago, this year versus a year before. So first of all, you can see something like ready-to-drink cocktails. If I would have done that 3 or 4 years ago, that wouldn't be on this chart, but it'd be way over to the right-hand side. Now, at least by volume, it's the number 2 category. Not a lot of growth spots, but it's no surprise to anybody that premixed cocktails as well as tequila are 2 of those segments that are growing. If we do the same thing on dollars, the percent changes, the trend doesn't change a whole lot, but the order of categories does change a whole lot. So tequila moves way over to the left, number 1 spot, supplanting vodka, and ready-to-drink cocktails moves way over to the right in terms of dollars. So we looked, the first slide was volume, the second is value or dollars. Dale, what about premiumization, where we always saw like trading up, premiumization? What are we seeing now?
Yeah, if we compare it, and people love to put headlines out there, and I've read so many headlines, premiumization is dead. Premiumization's not dead, and it never will be dead. There's always going to be consumers who premiumize. But we've seen with inflation and everything that's going on with the cost of goods that are happening, we've definitely seen the line between performance of dollars and performance on volume trends really come together. To where on the 12-month end, they're almost the same. And actually, in the last 3 months of the year, so October, November, December, volume actually performed better than dollars during that period. So we are seeing that premiumization is becoming much, much more difficult. But again, I always believe that there is always going to be consumers who do premiumize, and if that's where your product is, go after them. When we look at this on a price tier standpoint and some of what is driving what we just saw, really what we see here is that over $100 segment really has taken a hit. You've had about 18 months in the spirits category where anything over $100 has been really, really difficult to move. However, that next one down, 50 to 100, it's doing better. We see that also show up in things like Añejo tequila doing not as well, where Reposado's doing very, very well. But then we also see down there at that low end, the $4 area, or the below $10, that area is doing better. And by the way you read this chart, the green bar represents the share by dollars, the blue represents the share in volume, and the dots represent the trend that is happening from a revenue standpoint. So as we look at this, there seems to be some movement to the middle, the ends, certainly on the high end struggling, the low end doing a little bit better. What I've talked about here and what we've been talking about is 1 year periods, but taking a longer term view, what does it look like, Danny, if we back out a little bit and take a bit of a longer term view?
Yeah, I was able to go back, again, using SipSource data, and look at, for spirits, what we saw in 2020, 2021, really high numbers. You can see 8% growth. And then it started to ease after those really large increases, and we saw decreases, declines in 2024. But if we look at where we ended up in 2024 versus before COVID started, I mean, that's a really impressive growth rate, +9. I think anybody would be happy in the long term with that kind of growth, partly because of those really high increases we saw in the first couple years. And if you do that same exercise and do that and then look at 2024 versus 2019, this is what it looks like by subcategory. Cocktails up 219%, tequila this year versus 2019 up 50%. So even though it may be flat now, that's after those consecutive years of really strong increases. Cordials up 7. Then we have 3 or 4 categories kind of in the middle, and we do have some categories that haven't, were down, didn't really benefit from COVID all that much in terms of sales growth, and are on the decline. So spirits, it's kind of a mixed picture, but I don't think we should lose sight of those really strong increases that we saw, especially for those categories in blue. If we take it just a little bit further, and again, lots of different ways of cutting the data, but if we look at the different spirits subcategories by price tier, and then I just highlighted what categories and price tiers are growing. And you can see it's kind of a little bit in a couple different categories. Tequila is pretty strong. Reposo's up several times for anything between about $10 and $100. So that, again, there are categories, subcategories doing well. One of them that certainly is, and it's not on this slide because I wanted to talk to it a bit separately, is ready-to-drink cocktails. I don't know about you, when I go into a store, sometimes this is kind of what I see. Trying to make rhyme or reason out of it is a little bit difficult. Seems to, in some cases, be a bit of a treasure hunt. Within that, there are some malt-based products, there are some wine-based products, there are some spirits-based products. I'm just going to talk to the spirits-based products for now. So these are, these are some pictures of some of the top spirit-based RTDs. But there's 500, 600, 700 brands that are also entering this category that's grown quite well. So if we look at some of the scan data, and this is just off-premise, we've seen a category that in 2021 was about $1 billion that's grown now to $2.5 billion, and is still growing at 19%. So the category as a whole, frankly, I thought it would slow down a little bit more than it has, but it's still growing at those pretty strong double-digit levels. I would only add a couple things just as an analyst when I look at the ready-to-drink spirits category. And that is, feels like everyone's in it. Beer companies are in it, wine companies, spirit companies, big companies, small companies. Everyone wants a piece of the action. Second thing is that some people love them. I think consumers probably like them. Lots of choice, lots of variety, but some don't. If you have a brand that isn't doing well, if you have a brand where maybe the RTD has cannibalized your mainstream spirit, retailers, how to shelve all this stuff, where to put it. So again, there's kind of, some love it, some maybe not as much. And then I think I've looked at the data to say I think there is some cannibalization of RTD spirits against mainstream spirits, in particular vodka and tequila, which is the major base, at least for RTD spirits. Still double-digit growth, but there's just a ton of churn and change. Not necessarily at the top, although even when I look at the top, half of today's top 10 RTD brands weren't in the top 10 in 2021. So the ranks, except for a few brands, they keep changing. Brands grow, brands decline. When I looked at the top 50 RTD brands, about half of them are in double-digit decline. Right? So you got to be really careful with what's working, not just short term, but what's working in the long term. And in my opinion, line extensions, as opposed to a brand new brand, have been kind of hit and miss. The top brands still dominate. These are the shares of the top 2, top 5, top 10 brands. That doesn't leave a ton for all the other brands, but as long as the category is growing, there's room for volume attainment. And then the questions that I would ask is, how is your RTD different from all the other RTDs that are out there? When you're bringing out something new, what's not just your trial rate, but what's the repeat rate? So if a consumer buys it once, are they buying it again the second time, the third time? And not just sales growth, but what's your sales rate of growth, which combines your sales and your distribution together. So that's a quick thing about RTDs. Really exciting category, though. On the wine side, same thing. I wanted just to show the different, I think here we're showing by color and then sparkling and a couple of other subcategories. Unfortunately, not a lot of growth. I mean, the wine category, we saw the overall numbers. Within the sparkling category, Prosecco certainly stands out as one area where there is growth, but 2024 following 2023 has been a challenging year for wine, and I think we're all sort of searching for being relevant, especially for the younger consumer for this category. That's on volume. This is on dollars. Doesn't change all that much, except that red wine, especially with Cabernet Sauvignon and Pinot Noir, moves up to the #1 color, followed by white wines. So how about, Dale, I think you showed the slide on premiumization for spirits. Does the wine one look like this? Or
very similar picture, Danny. And if we look at this, you can see that there's really been a drop here, and that we've seen the wine, on the wine side, we've seen revenue and volume really come together, the growth lines on those. So that is definitely happened to the point where in the holiday season, we were down to 30 basis points difference between that. So that is definitely happening. If we look at the price tiers and break this out by price tiers, and one thing that we always like to talk about, and premiumization is great, but so much of the wine industry is still done below $15. That's where the volume remains in there, and we really, as an industry on the wine side, need to take care of that. We are seeing a lot of improvement in the over $50 category, and that has been happening here in the last few months. And you can see on our headline of this slide up there that O&D was really good in that category, and it's good news. And as we looked at this, it's like, well, is it good news? And the reason we asked that question is because we also know that wine is much more variable in supply, and that supply has a very big impact in what happens more so on the wine side than it does the spirit side. And as we've looked at what's happening within the wine side, we are in a state of oversupply right now. And some of that leads to specific behaviors. And Danny, I think you saw some of these in your local
that's
market.
where, again, sometimes I think you got to drill down to see what's really going on. So I was pretty excited when I saw $50 wines growing again. They were back in 2021, but then started to struggle a little bit. So I was excited. And then I looked at it a little bit further, and it's almost all, not all, but a large chunk of it's coming from Costco. Personally, I shop at Costco a fair bit. I look at all the signs there. There's a ton of good deals there, which is great for a consumer when you can buy a $100 Napa cab for $50 or something like that. But I think we got to be a little bit careful when we're seeing these huge growth rates is, what's behind it. As Dale said, if it's suppliers need to move their stock, and Costco might be the kind of retailer that you can do that, that's what shows up in this data. So I was also able to kind of reconstruct the wine category like I did with spirits and look at not just the past couple years, but go back and look at 2021, 22, 23, 24 versus the prior year. This is, again, SipSource data on and off premise together, so we're covering kind of all three-tier channels. The interesting thing here isn't the declines, we don't want to see that, but it's where the declines are coming from. So if we look at that by price tier, and you look at from under sort of $5 on an equivalent 750 ml to under 11, to the $8 to $11 category. This year versus where we were back in 2020 is monstrously down, right? Then you get to 11, 15 a little bit, and then you get actually over 15 and doing okay, right? I mean, I'd be relatively happy with that. That over 50 is up 29%. In 2021, that over 50 height of COVID was up over 50%. Huge, a whole lot of people buying wine. I'm not saying it's all sitting in their wine fridges, but maybe some of it is. So if we combine that with how important are each of those price segments to the table wine category, that's what this slide says, is that 2/3 of the volume of the wine category is done under $11. And if I add in that 11 to 15, now I'm up to over 80% of the category is done under $15. If we can't generate some growth or start to get back to better levels or smaller levels of declines, it's really hard for the premium and ultra premium and luxury category to overcome the growth rate declines that we see on the left-hand side. And frankly, the other thing is across those price tiers, the higher up you go, the percentage of wine consumers that buy at those price tiers changes a lot.
Yeah, and when we think about this is data from the Wine Market Council, and this is an overstatement of the obvious. As price goes up, there's a smaller pool of people who are participating in that. So what these bars represent is the percentage of people who are buying in that category on a monthly basis, at least once a month. So we can see that after you get to that $20 price point, it really drops off quickly. So the pool of people that you're really trying to target gets much, much smaller as price increases. But, Danny, there are areas of growth and success within the wine categories. What do those look like?
There are. So same chart as this one for table wine, domestic wines, by varietal, by price tier. So again, look for those areas of growth, which is the cells that are highlighted in blue. Again, some of that $50 plus, just think about what I said about sort of that club channel. So how much of that is sustainable or not, I'm not sure. But the other thing, since I looked at it a little bit more closely, if you add up all of the cells that are white varietals, there's a whole lot more of those than are red varietals. So if I put that on kind of a different chart, these are the growth rates for white, red, and rosé, or pink. And then on the right-hand side of just the color is breaking it down by varietal. To me, Dale, you're colorblind, so you probably don't see this, but there's a more preponderance of those whiter styles that are doing better than some of the red styles. So in general, maybe that goes along with a healthier diet. Maybe it goes along with certain cuisine types that are a bit less heavy than a heavy steak meal, even though I love steak meals. And maybe it's an area with a bit more innovation in the area of things like better for you type wines, low calorie, zero sugar, things like that. On the import side, I looked at that sort of by country and by price tier. Again, lots of areas where there's opportunities, where there's growth. In the case of imports, I think it was a little bit more spread out across different price tiers, going from the really less expensive side over to the more expensive side. And almost every country had at least one cell where there was something good happening. The last thing just about wine is there's a lot of other things where there's sort of niche segments that are growing. And I am never disdainful of any segment that's growing, even if it may be small. So that includes, better for you, and I'm going to say in quotation marks, everyone maybe calls it something different. That includes non-alcoholic wines, relatively small, but I look at beer and non-alcoholic beer as, if we could get to that level, there's a ton of incremental volume there. Low cal, low sugar, zero sugar wines. At the same time, if I look at some of the higher ABV wines, like the XXL brand, if you've seen that, it's like a 16% flavorful dessert wine that's also doing well, so it's never one thing or the other. Organic wines, wine-based cocktails, they are growing, not as fast or not as big as spirits, but they're growing as well. And then smaller sizes. So 750 ml bottle is great, but it doesn't fit every single occasion. Either because I'm a single person household, I'm not going to drink a whole bottle, or I'm going to the swimming pool, the beach, that just doesn't fit for me, or I'm going to a convenience store, they don't have a ton of space. So there are growth opportunities for sizes other than kind of the mainstream package size. Let's talk about the path forward. So what is the path forward? This is very simplistic, but I resist the temptation to be excessively pessimistic. I certainly hope you do too. You know, I would never say it can't be done, never would say we should just give up. On the other hand, I don't want to be overly optimistic and just sit back and wait and hope that good things happen, but rather I think we need to buy into the reality of we have some issues. There's lots of facts and data and lots of smart people to address the problem because it won't solve itself if we don't work together to solve it. And there are some facts that we have to take a look at what this could look like going forward.
Yeah, and so we have been working, SipSource, we've been working with Kearney on a forecast model, and we've been doing this now, and you can see on the left-hand side there, these are actual results that are coming in, and then the next year, what our model says for total spirits, less RTD, so what we call traditional spirits. And you can see what's happening is that we see a little bit of an increase, a little bit of an improvement in the first quarter into the middle, but then it says that it's going to fade off towards the back half of next year. With these forecasts, we always like to look at these forecasts as if we do nothing. That these are current conditions, and if we don't act, this is likely what's going to happen. This forecast has proven to be very, very accurate. It has been very successful. Come by the SipSource booth and we will talk to you about what goes into this model and how it works. But on the spirit side, and before you can get back to growth, and when you look at the slope of that line on the left-hand side, believe me, bringing that to flat is a very good start. Then we can start to turn it back to the positive side. On the wine side, we don't do a forecast on the wine side yet. That will come after spirits. But a friend of ours, a colleague of ours over at Silicon Valley Bank, Rob McMillan, did a lot of work here around age of people and what their likelihood is to drink wine and where they are in that wine journey. He just did his State of the Industry report last week or the week before, I think. And by his calculation, he believes that it's going to be, if we don't do anything, that it'll probably be 3 years before we really start turning the tide on the wine side. So we really have to start thinking about that, think about what are we going to do to correct course on this, and start building it back and getting to it on the positive side. It's going to be, there's going to be some challenges, but I do think there will be bright spots ahead, and really it's going to be about who adapts and who does well within adapting to change.
So we want to close up here. I'm not going to offer you my closing thoughts. My good friend Charles would like to offer you his closing thoughts, but I think it's particularly pertinent that the ones that will survive, the ones that will thrive, are the ones that are going to be most responsive to change. And I've been doing this 25 or so years. I haven't seen as much change over that time frame as I'm seeing now, which means that we really need to do things, recognize that, and do things differently, because the same old just isn't going to work. So with that, we must act, right? And
yeah, I think
what else?
This remains a great industry, and when I look out at the audience, there is a wide range of people and where they are in their experience in the category. For those of us who have been in the category for 4 years, it's been a great run. It's been really great. There's been ups and downs along the ways. We've lived through those and we've adjusted to those. In the short term, it appears that there's more headwinds than tailwinds. That's what we're seeing. However, we can impact those headwinds.
We can impact those headwinds. Well said. But it also means we need to get informed. We need to recognize what's going on. There's lots of signals out there. There's lots of information out there that tell us that. And then we need to get unified. And I feel like this is the word of the day, even though I didn't know what Francis was going to say. But I feel like, we can, being competitive, that's a healthy thing, right? Healthy competition is a good thing. But these days, collaborating with one another, where we can either share resources, share activities, share capabilities where it makes sense, just is the right thing to do right now. So with that, we want to thank you for the privilege of your time. We hope you have a great conference, and we appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you.